Okay, let's get right to it. Who was the first king of England? I mean, the first person to actually rule over a united English kingdom. Well, the answer, it's probably not who you think. I mean, if you've seen shows like The Last Kingdom, your brain probably goes straight to one guy, right? Alfred the Great. He's the hero, the one who fought the Vikings, the one who saved the day. But was he the king of all England? Not quite. Nope. The real story, the one about how England was actually forged, well, that belongs to his grandson. We're talking about maybe the most important king you've never even heard of. His name? Æthelstan. All right, so to really get what Æthelstan pulled off, we need to take a step back. We have to understand the world he was born into. And let me tell you, it was a deeply fractured, pretty violent place. So back in the 9th century, there's no England. Not really. It's more like a patchwork quilt of rival Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. You had Wessex down south, Mercia in the middle, and then Northumbria and East Anglia, which, honestly, were usually controlled by Danish Vikings. Now, Alfred the Great, his big claim to fame was saving his kingdom, Wessex, from getting totally wiped out. A huge deal, for sure. But he never ruled the whole place we think of as England today. And that's where our guy, Æthelstan, comes in. But his path to the throne? Oh, it was anything but easy. Honestly, he was a super unlikely heir. See, the thing is, he was the son of King Edward the Elder, sure, but his mother, a woman named Ecgwin, her status was, well, complicated. Some accounts say she was a noblewoman, others say she was a concubine, and that little bit of ambiguity, it was pure political dynamite. His rivals used it all the time to claim he was illegitimate, that he had no right to the throne. So you can imagine what happens when his dad dies in 924. The whole kingdom just splits down the middle. Mercia, where Æthelstan grew up, they backed him right away. But Wessex, the traditional heartland, they threw their weight behind his half-brother, Ælfweard. I mean, England was staring down the barrel of a civil war. And then, just 16 days later, Ælfweard dies. Suddenly, Æthelstan is left to claim a throne that's still very, very shaky. Okay, so you're probably wondering, how in the world do we know any of this stuff from over 1,000 years ago? Well, it pretty much all comes down to one major historical source for this whole period. That source is the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. But here's the catch, and this is super important. It's not one single book. It's actually a collection of different records, all copied and updated by monks in different monasteries across the country, over centuries. You know, think of it less like one official history book and more like a bunch of different local newspapers, where each one has its own perspective and its own local gossip. So here's basically how it worked. There was an original version, what historians call the common stock, that was probably put together back in Wessex during Alfred's time. Copies of that got sent out to different monasteries. But then the local monks, scribes in places like Peterborough or Worcester, they'd start adding their own updates, their own local news. And this is where it gets really fun, because they didn't always see eye to eye. Just look at this. This is history being written and rewritten right before our eyes. Let's take the story of Earl Elfgar's exile in 1055. One version, Manuscript C, says he was kicked out without any fault, totally innocent. Manuscript D is a little more careful, saying well nigh without fault. But then you get to Manuscript E, and boom, it says he was outlawed because he was a traitor, and he even admitted it. It's the exact same event, but we're getting 3 totally different stories. This is exactly why being a historian is like being a detective. So, think about it. Æthelstan has this shaky claim to the throne, and the historical records we have are kind of tricky, but he didn't just hang on by a thread. No. He methodically, piece by piece, started building what we now call England. And this timeline lays out his playbook perfectly. Look at 926. He's playing the diplomat, marrying his sister off to the Viking king of York to keep the peace. Smart. But then, just 1 year later, that king dies. What does Æthelstan do? He drops the diplomacy and uses force, grabbing the kingdom of York for himself. And that sets up his real masterstroke in July of 927. This meeting at Emont Bridge, this was the big one. All the major players, the King of the Scots, powerful Welsh kings, the King of Strathclyde, they all came and basically bent the knee. They acknowledged Æthelstan as their overlord. This had never happened before. For the first time ever, one single Anglo-Saxon king was the undisputed top dog on the entire island of Britain. But, building a kingdom is one thing. Keeping it together, that's a whole different ballgame. And this brand new, fragile England was about to face the biggest test of its life.
Those same rulers who just submitted to Æthelstan, yeah, they weren't happy about it. They were resentful. And as they watched his power grow, they started whispering in the shadows. A huge alliance began to take shape, all aimed at taking him down.
And we're not talking about some small-time rebellion here. This was a massive international coalition. You had the Viking king of Dublin, Olaf Guthfridsson, teaming up with King Constantine of Scotland and the king of Strathclyde. This was the big leagues.
Their goal was simple, and it was brutal. They wanted to completely crush Æthelstan and shatter his new kingdom before it even had a chance to get started. Everything came to a head in 937 at a massive, legendary, and incredibly bloody battle, the Battle of Brunanburh.
And the historical records really give you a sense of just how horrific this battle was. An Irish source, the Annals of Ulster, calls it a great, lamentable, and horrible battle, cruelly fought. No poetry there, just a stark description of the absolute carnage.
But then you look at the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. Remember, that's the English perspective, the voice of the winners. And the tone is totally different. They wrote a heroic poem about it, celebrating Æthelstan and his brother as these glorious warriors, carving up their enemies with swords, which they call the leavings of hammers. It was a brutal, bloody day, but for England, it was the victory that defined the nation.
So that victory at Brunanburh, it saved his kingdom and it cemented his legacy. So what exactly is that legacy?
It's this, plain and simple. Æthelstan was the first person to rule over all the Anglo-Saxons and all the Danes living in England under one single government. He was the first guy to be officially called King of the English. He didn't just save one corner of the island like his grandfather Alfred did. He created England. Which brings us to one last really fascinating question. If Æthelstan truly built England, if he won the battle that secured its future, and if he was its very first king, then why is Alfred the Great the one we all remember?